Hi everyone and welcome back to Newegg TV. My name is Paul and today we're going to be doing an unboxing and an overview of this X58 based motherboard. This is the Gigabyte G1 Assassin. So here we can see a closer look at the box. As you can tell, they're going with a very strong military theme given that this is a gaming motherboard aimed at high-end gaming systems. Down here we can see a few of the logos that they have. This is a socket 1366 motherboard, so it will support Core i7 processors from Intel based on the 1366 socket. It has the Intel X58 chipset. It has a couple integrated extra pieces of hardware that are really nice. First of all, the creative Pci Extreme Fidelity sound chip that's built into the board, and also a killer E2100 gaming network interface card. It's essentially like getting a killer add-on card, but it's integrated into the board. Get both that as well as the killer software, which is fantastic networking software. Right here we can see it has a front access panel that they've included, which gives you a couple USB 3.0 ports as well as powered eSATA. They've integrated serial ATA revision 3, 6 gigabit per second, as well as USB 3.0 into the board. That's very nice because that's something that does not come integrated by default with the X58 chipset. Down here we can see that they have, with the creative card, they've really done a lot for audio on this board, which is fantastic for gaming, especially if you have some high quality speakers or headset. And actually the headphone outputs from the board are actually amplified, which is another thing that you really don't see on any motherboards that are out there. It supports Dolby Live and DTS Connect. There's a built-in front audio headphone amplifier, just as we just mentioned. High-end audio capacitors, that's for the audio amplifier that's right there. The board itself we'll get a closer look at once we get it out of the box. They're highlighting some of their heat sinks here as far as the design and just the general functionality of those. They've included smart fan connectors, so your case fans can be controlled through the motherboard via PWM. And then all of these logos over here indicating the Gigabyte branded stuff such as the ultra durable PCB, the MOSFETs, the CPU phase power, and these dual BIOS that supports booting from 3 terabyte mechanical hard drives. The one final thing from the back of the box that I actually did not mention is the support for both 4-way Crossfire, so you can have 4 AMD cards in a Crossfire configuration, or you can have 3-way SLI if you're using NVIDIA video cards. So this board will support either of those. There is the box for the motherboard itself. Here is the box for all of the accessories. First off, we have a Gigabyte poster, which is a Gigabyte poster on one side, and a nice little. This will help you out with your shooting if you're into shooting guns in real life, not just in video games. Next up, we have, this is pretty cool. They've given you a nice little selection of decals that you can decorate your computer with, so that everyone will be able to tell that you have a G1 killer motherboard inside your case fan. We got some bullet holes, we got some bullets, we got some G1 killer logos, nice skull logo right there. Nice little bonus items to have with this high-end motherboard. Here's our Gigabyte manual, very key, very important for installation. Here is our Gigabyte installation driver CD, which I would usually recommend heading over to the Gigabyte website to download updated drivers rather than using the ones off the disk. Here's our Gigabyte powered decal for your case. Here's a Dolby Home Theater decal for your case. I don't know about you guys, but I really like putting decals on my cases. I always do it. Anyway, here's our Multilingual Guidebook. So in case you are not an English speaker, we have apparently Asian is what it's listed there. Although there are multiple languages in here. Here's our serial ATA cables. We have 4 included. Looks like 2 of them have the right angle head on one side. 2 of them have straight connectors on both sides. They're the nicer serial ATA cables. They're the nicer ones that have the little hook there that latches on, so you make sure that your cable's plugged in and connected securely. Here are our Crossfire Connect cables. They're the extra long ones because they want you to space. Actually, this is Crossfire, this is SLI. They want you to space out. If you're using a 2-card solution, they want you to use the 1st and 3rd slots. Here is our 3-way SLI plug. If you're rocking a 3-card NVIDIA SLI setup. You can use that. Anyway, here's our back panel input-output shield, and this is actually the first time I've ever actually seen an I/O shield that has printing on it. So even your shield there will say G1 Killer, so everyone knows what kind of motherboard you got. Here's our front panel little connector box. There's just a bunch of screws to bolt it down. This is a 5 1/4 inch front panel adapter. Will fit in one of your 5 1/4 bays. Dual USB 3.0 ports on there. A powered eSATA port, which is really nice to have. If you have any sort of external powered eSATA thing, you can always find powered eSATA ports. And then there's a quick boost button right here, which I'm not familiar with yet, but I'll share a little bit more about that with you guys later on. And finally, back here at the back, we have our SATA plug for routing your powered eSATA port up there. I'm guessing that these two plugs here will plug in directly into the motherboard because these are not standard style plugs. And this here is an internal USB 3.0 header plug to route to your USB ports on the front of that little adapter box. Very nice to have that kit. Keeps you up to date with the newest connection standards. USB 3.0 is very fast, very useful, and very handy to have front panel connectors for that rather than having to go around to the back of your computer every time. All right, it's about time we move on to the motherboard itself. And man, is this thing a beast. It is huge, much bigger than your standard ATX motherboards. And without further ado, let's get right into it and go over all of the bells and whistles that they've included on the G1 Assassin. All right, guys, so there is the G1 Killer Assassin motherboard itself. This is, as mentioned, just a huge motherboard. The form factor is XL-ATX, which is both wider and taller than a standard ATX motherboard. So I'm going to real quick set another standard ATX motherboard up against it there. Can you tell? Yes. So there you can get a good example of how much taller, how much wider. It's a good about 3/4 of an inch wider, probably good 2.5 inches taller. Make sure you have a case that can support a motherboard this size if you're going to go with the G1 Assassin. And from there, let's just start going over some of the features. First off, the PWM fan controllers. If you have case fans, you can plug them directly into the motherboard and control them via PWM. So 2 on the bottom, 1 on the side here, 1 up here by the input-output shield, and then your CPU fan. Moving on for our front panel connectors, they have these separated out here. I don't know if we can get nice and close on that. They're color-coded, which is great. You don't. It's very helpful to have that. Right here we have our USB front panel connectors right there. Those are USB 2.0. Next to that, we have 2 USB 3.0 front panel connectors. Great to see those becoming more prevalent in motherboards. Again, there's your PWM fan controller. Here is a supplemental Molex power plug right there at the bottom. We have 2 of those on this board. One is down there at the bottom, one is right up here by the PCI Express bays. Those are to provide additional power because this board is meant to support just about as much hardware as you can possibly throw at it. Down here on the bottom left of the board, we can see our onboard Creative Soundblaster X-Fi digital audio processor. This is the 20K2 version. It's got X-Fi extreme fidelity as well as EAX 5.0 technology. All of these little items that you can see right here are audio capacitors that help to drive the powered front panel audio port. There's your front panel audio connector right down there at the bottom, right next to the chip. And pretty much this entire section here is dedicated to the hardware for the more advanced audio that they've integrated onto the motherboard. So there's your audio section there. Let's see, we're still on the bottom half of the board. What am I missing so far? Let's go over here to our serial ATA ports. We have 8 serial ATA ports built in. All of these 6 black ones here are serial ATA revision 2, 3 gigabits per second. The white one here is serial ATA revision 3, 6 gigabits per second. These are controlled by the ICH10 chipset on the motherboard, ICH10R I should say, and these 2 here are controlled by an add-on serial ATA controller. All right, and so before we move to the top half of the board, 2 more items to go over. First is all of our Pci Express slots there, and as you can see, this is set up to support both 3-way SLI or 4-way Crossfire configurations, and what we have is 4 PCI Express ports. These can operate at 16x although you can set up 2 at 16x, and you're going to have to make some accommodations if you're going for multiple cards. Beyond that, we have a couple single-speed PCI Express ports. We've got a standard PCI Express port there as well. And then again, as mentioned, there's an extra Molex connector for additional power to provide to any of these. If you're going with a 2-card setup, you're going to be using the first and third ports. So bear in mind that if you're doing that, you're going to block one of your 1X ports, you're going to block one, and you're going to block your standard PCI port, although you will still have open one of your full-length PCI Express ports, a single PCI Express, and then another full-length PCI Express port. All right, before we move to this top half of the board up there, we have to mention this magazine over here that they're using to cool the chipset on the motherboard. It says G1 Killer on it. It's a nice magazine. It's got a little bullet sticking out at the top there, and they have a little bit of extra information there that says this is not actually, it says heatsink, not a weapon, cannot be assembled as a firearm. So don't try to pull that off your motherboard and stick it into your gun. Okay, bottom half complete. Let's move on to the top half. There's still a lot more to go over. Right here, we can see our killer E2100 network interface card. There's the chip for that. The port itself is back here on the back. Speaking of which, let's go over our input-output ports we have here. There is all of your back panel audio ports. You also have a Toslink port right there for optical audio. There's your killer NIC port. There are a couple USB 2.0 slots here as well as here, and then you have 4 USB 3.0 ports as well. You have a coax audio, and then your mouse and keyboard plugs. Moving to the CPU socket area. Here we have our socket 1366 CPU socket. As you can see, surrounded by our heat sinks for all of the power phase technology going over there. Right here, if you can see, we actually have 2 separate EPS power plugs, so you can plug both of those in if you have a power supply that supplies dual EPS power 8-pin, and that will just basically give tons and tons of power to the CPU. This has a 16-phase power technology from the MOSFETs there, and it also has a power backup solution that will make sure that you're getting full and clean power to your CPU at all times. Moving on with the heatsink design, one other little unique thing they've done here, this one is actually shaped like the barrel of a gun, so you can see the barrel of the gun right there. Just a little bit of extra flair that they've added. It also says G1 Assassin right there. Here's our heatsink for our Northbridge chipset, and as well as you can see, they all use a heat pipe design. They have a sort of a matte black finish, matches very well with the green and black design of the motherboard overall. And finally, am I to finally yet? Can I say that? Oh yes. All right. So finally, we have our Ddr3 Ram Slots. 6 of them set up for triple channel memory, and you can have up to 24 gigs of memory installed across all 6 of those. All right, guys, a couple last things before we close up here. If you remember, this is our front panel that you route to the motherboard, and there is a button on here that says Quick Boost. That connects to this little 6-pin connector right there, which you plug into the motherboard. Wait, where'd it go? Right here. And that will allow you to use the Quick Boost button, which you can configure using the software that comes with the G1 Assassin. Next up is this little flat 4-pin cable, and that actually is like half of a USB connector. They want you to route that to one of the front panel USB ports right there, and that will provide power to the powered eSATA port right there on the front. I also wanted to mention that our serial ATA revision 3 6 gigabit per second ports there, the 2 are controlled by a Marvell controller, also has RAID 0 and RAID 1 capability. And finally, just as far as our heat sinks are concerned, on the back here we can see that they are all bolted on with screws, which is very nice because it provides extra support, also makes it much easier to remove them in case you wanted to go with some sort of aftermarket cooling, which probably is not necessary given the heavy-duty heat sinks that they've included with the G1 Assassin, but it is nice to have that capability. Yes, one last thing here is that there is a small bank of LEDs right here on the Northbridge heat sink power plugs right into the motherboard right there. Don't really do anything functionality-wise, it's just aesthetic. There are some other LEDs elsewhere on the motherboard that you can use for troubleshooting, but that's just a little addition that they've added. And that pretty much wraps it up for our unboxing and overview of the killer G1 Assassin motherboard made by Gigabyte. My name is Paul. Thank you very much for watching today's video, everyone, and we will see you next time on Newegg TV.